No, because there's something almost clumsy about the whole thing and vaguely pathetic. But I'm afraid I'm just a doomed fan, as it were.
Well, is it true that you spent 3 months secluded in your bedroom as a teenager?
Much more than that, I'm sure, but I do distinctly remember one period where I hardly ever left the room for a 3-month period.
What were you doing in there?
Well, that's a good question. I used to write furiously, and I was just really nailed to the typewriter, and I was swimming in paper and all kind of introspective things like that. I wasn't exactly your average teenager.
Did you want to stay there?
The alternatives weren't very glamorous. If I left the room, I'd probably end up at some obscure pub or wandering about the park, which was always quite dangerous. I really had no options. I mean, I was living the kind of life. I was unemployed for a very long time and I had no money. I was living a life to a large degree that I didn't choose, being financially absurdly embarrassed. So it really seemed to me that I would never ever settle for second best in life. That if I couldn't have exactly what I wanted, then I would have absolutely nothing. Because to me, nothing always seemed more important to me than a false something or something that I didn't really want. So therefore I stayed in. I did nothing. I just wrote, and I was determined that if I couldn't have exactly what I wanted, then I would disappear into the woodwork.
What did you write about, and what happened to all that stuff?
Most of it I later destroyed, because on reflection it always seemed so embarrassingly real and personal that it could only ever really be destroyed. But I did write lots of things that I still have. It got to the point with me where I'd simply write anything just for the sake of writing. Just kind of critical essays on certain things that nobody really cared about.
Do you like the idea, then, of living in a secret world?
Not especially, not really. I mean, if somebody said to me, would you rather be incredibly popular and have a throng of supportive friends, or would you rather be a distressed, hysterical person locked in the bedroom? I think I really would choose to be quite popular. But I don't remember choosing the way I lived.
But it seems very much like a kind of fantasy world, your teenage.
It does, but I can assure you it really wasn't. But I think you can look upon almost anything and almost any existence which is quite extraordinary, and it can almost sound quite fantastic and like a fantasy. It's like the lives of very famous people can seem incredibly glamorous when slapped onto paper, but of course, for a large point, they couldn't possibly be.
Because most teenagers become obsessed with sex.
Mm.
Did you go through that period?
No, I never did. I think I brushed quite close when I was 19 and 20, but previous to that period I didn't give it a great deal of thought, and it wasn't really something that I really needed to think about, because in my life it didn't really exist. I was aware that certain things should have occurred and certain things should interest me, and I was aware of teenagers around me frolicking about and being incredibly inconsequential and free-thinking, which I never was. So that kind of period when you're just supposed to be totally reckless and you're supposed to care about nothing apart from yourself and having as much fun as possible, I'm afraid I skirted past that period quite seriously and severely. And it's something that I regret enormously now, but there's not really any point.
So you regret not sowing your wild oats, etc.?
Yes, I do. I do regret that.
In those days, did you spend any evenings fumbling in the back seats of cinemas?
Fumbling in haystacks? No, I certainly didn't. Whenever I went to cinemas, I always raced for the front seat, I'm afraid. I was that boring.
You say in other interviews that you're now celibate.
Mm.
Is that true?
Yes, I'm afraid so. I don't have a certificate, but I can only say that I am.
Is that part of the Smiths' mythology?
Not really, because the other 3 members of the group are quite the reverse. Again, this gets almost repetitious, but it was something that I initially had no say in, which sounds almost pitiful, but it really wasn't. and it's something that I got increasingly used to, and it's something that I became so aware of as the years ticked past, and I realized that I was quite solitary in this area, that suddenly I realized that it was something that I would quite perversely cling to. It became quite important to me for some reason. Suddenly it became really serious whether I got involved or not, whereas to most people it really isn't.
Was your celibacy then prompted by a bad experience?
I've had very few experiences, but they have been bad, yes, and they were a very long time ago. And it's not something that I would like to repeated, but this gets incredibly delicate and icy, and it becomes almost difficult to talk about. But yes, I would say that it was. I did lose the very idea that any communion between two people could possibly be enjoyable. I did lose that particular thread. And I did become enormously depressed to the point where I believed that any kind of relationship was almost impossible.
Is there a fear now, then, of sex?
No, it's not a fear. I wouldn't quite say that. But something, but not fear. No,
How
not
would you
fear.
describe it?
Slightly, perhaps just too much thought, too much anticipation. Perhaps I don't really care enough.
Would anything inspire you to break your celibate state?
It's not impossible, but it's not something that I give a great deal of thought to, and I believe for it to happen, I believe that for it to happen, I would have to be of a particular mode of thinking, which I'm not. I'm of the frame of mind that it won't happen, and therefore it doesn't.
Because you've said that you want children. Who would you want to be their mother?
I don't know. Me, perhaps. I don't know. That's something that I have no answer for. Sometimes I sit down and I quite like the idea. I must admit that other times I stand up and I despise the idea. But I suppose everybody feels that their own children could almost be models of themselves and therefore be completely acceptable. But when we gaze at other children, we're quite frightened, I should imagine. I do like the idea, but I realise that now over the years I've become uncommonly selfish.
There are, in some of your songs, lyrics that pertain to heterosexual rejection and homosexual isolation. That was quoted in this week's Rolling Stone.
Yes.
Is that the way you feel, isolated?
I do, yes, but it's an isolation that is, it sounds laughable, but almost genderless, because I don't have any, I don't speak from a very strict heterosexist angle. I cannot segregate the sexes. I cannot see women over there and men over there, and this large chasm between the two.
Where do you place yourself?
In the middle somewhere, straddling, I'm afraid, but I feel that this way, that in popular music at least, by now there should be a voice which kind of speaks for everybody, but doesn't say things in a way that is so neutral that it is absolutely non-sexual. I do like to speak for both the sexes, because I feel that the difference between them is incredibly slim.
But you once said that being a sex symbol was the best thing to be.
But that was at a time when I thought that it could possibly never happen, and to a small degree it has happened.
So do you consider yourself a sex symbol?
Well, other people do seem to, so therefore in a way I suppose I must be. I mean, it's not something that we decide for ourselves. We don't say, yes, I'm going to be a sex symbol, and I will appeal to lots of people in an immensely sexual way. That's not something that we decide. Other people decide it, and to some degree they have. I mean, I get letters saying, Morrissey, you're incredibly sexy, and of course I throw them away.
You throw them away?
No. I frame them.
What do you do with them?
Oh, I keep them all. I reply to them, take their phone numbers, etc. No, I don't.
You're being slightly flippant.
Yes, I'm being unnecessarily flippant.
But how does it feel to be a sex symbol, given what you've just said?
Well, I get these letters and I read them and I say, and then we appear on stage and girls scream and, you know, they want to touch me, and I kind of look at them and I read these letters and I look at the whole thing and I say, well, yes, it's very interesting, but I do feel slightly detached from it.
Do you feel contempt?
No, I don't feel any degree of contempt, but I feel that, well, yes, they're screaming and they're writing these letters, but they're not really addressed to me. It's just an accident that they happen to land through my letterbox, because it's quite difficult at times to, the way I live and the way I think about things, and then to kind of really see the way other people see me, and to associate with this person that who should receive these letters. This kind of sexual person, this desirable person. It's not really me.
So they're writing to someone else?
Yeah, I do feel that. Wrongly, I suppose.
You had a Catholic upbringing.
Mm.
What kind of influence did that have on you? I mean, are you religious now?
No, I'm not. It had quite a detrimental influence on me. I went to stern working-class Catholic schools, which were very depressing and very repressive, and I never liked this. And it always seemed to me entirely wrong to inflict all these kind of foul, ugly images onto children. These images of serpents trampled underfoot with fire coming out of their nostrils and things like that, or whatever. And this constant belief at school that if you don't go to church, it's a cardinal sin and you shall burn in hell and God will strike you down. This constant fear of whatever you do, you're wrong, and whatever you do, you're guilty. And just simply by reason of your existence, you are absolutely guilty in every way. I despised that. I often felt that Christianity and the Catholic Church were quite severely divided. And I also looked upon Ireland, being the most Catholic country in the world, as being also the most repressed country in the world. It seemed to me wrong, it seemed to me black, because it didn't allow any degree of self-expression. It didn't allow any scope for individuality in any direction. This constantly carrying this thing on one's shoulder.
Do you have then the traditional sort of Catholic guilt complex now?
No, I don't. I mean, all that is just really candy floss. I never paid any attention to that whatsoever.
Could you see yourself ever returning to Catholicism?
No, because when people do, it always seems to be for very negative reasons. People get afraid. They realize that time is passing by, or they do feel this extreme guilt. People never really flock to the church for some very positive reason, which worries me slightly.
Do you not think that, there will come a time in your life when you will return to it?
I can't see it. I really can't. But who can tell?
I'd like to talk a bit about your image.
Mm.
How contrived is your public image?
It's not in the least bit contrived, but when you fall into the public eye, it seems to me that regardless of what you do or what you wear or what you say, it is construed as an image. I mean, you can wear no clothes at all and that will be seen as an image. So it's really quite inescapable, the whole thing. So there's no answer to that. One comes under the searchlights, the scorching searchlights, and everything that you do is an image.
Yes, I mean, walking around with foliage coming out your back pocket could be construed as being an image, could it not?
Possibly, yes.
Why do you do that?
I can see that. For quite delicate reasons, severe interest I had in nature and being close to nature, which is something that Oscar Wilde felt, and I always thought was quite passionate and quite amusing. The idea of constantly carrying flowers, or of being simply immersed in leaves. I quite like that. It was quite poetic. But the way it happens to me in relation to the Smiths, I do get quite depressed that many detractors focus upon that and not the music. And I do see quite clearly when people want to criticize the Smiths, the only thing that they can talk about is the flowers, and that it's absurd, and that it's... I mean, I realized that I was voted Wally of the Year the other day in some disreputable magazine simply for that sole reason.
But you have set yourself up for that, haven't you?
No, I
Come
don't.
on.
No, really, I don't believe that I have. I mean, to me, it's just really not that crucial. There are other things to talk about, and if people just see me as this strange character whirling flowers,